to focus on stuff, talking to parents and coaches. But after doing that, I'm looking at all y'all here, and there's parents and coaches over there, but these are our athletes right here. So I want to talk about two things, and all the fancy introductions are great. I do have a tendency also to talk on and on and on. When I'm looking over at Randy, I know I only got about 10 minutes. I'm going to ask, instead of asking the parents this, because I'm going to ask the parents this, and I'm going to ask the coaches this, but I'm going to ask you all here, the athletes here. How many of you, and raise your hands, are super motivated to do what you do? You really like what you do and you want to do it, cheering and doing all of this and working with the coaches. I don't see anyone's hands up. Y'all hate this? Okay, now let me ask you another question. How many of you are driven to do what you do? Right. Yes. You're like, what's driven? What does that mean? Parents, I'm going to ask you this. How many of you, first of all, I'm a psychologist. I'm not analyzing you. There's nothing deeper than any of the questions that I'm asking. There's nothing underneath it. Just this question. How many of you want your kids to be motivated in the sport that they are engaged in? Whether it's cheer, whether it's gymnastics, whether it's multiple sports. How many of you want your kids to be motivated? Same with coaches too. Okay. How many of you hope that they will become driven to do what they do? How many of you see a difference between motivation and being driven? Do you know what, and I'm not going to call it, do you know what the difference is? And the reason I say this is, I'm going to read you just really quickly, two definitions, okay? Motivated, this is straight from the dictionary. Having a general desire or willingness to do something. It means you want to do it. But listen to driven. Relentlessly compelled by the need to accomplish a goal. And the reason I'm talking about two different things here is we as parents and as coaches and as athletes, we want to be motivated to do these things, right? We want to enjoy this. We want to come out and practice. But being driven is different. Driven is something that's in here. And sometimes, and I'm going to tell you about some athletes in a minute that I work with, sometimes you're not driven to do the sport that you're doing. Sometimes you're just motivated. You're out here to have a great time and you're enjoying it. Sometimes you can be motivated and very successful at what you do and not driven at all. And sometimes you can be so driven, so compelled, you just feel it in your guts that you have to do this and still not do very good in sports. And here's the thing. There's all these things that we can do to help make our athletes more motivated. We can give them a nice place to practice and play. Like, look at this. Doesn't get any nicer than this. We can make it really easy and fun for them. We can be supportive of them as parents and coaches. We can push them a little bit. We can make sure that what they do doesn't cause so much pressure and stress that they begin to hate it. But here's the question. How do we, and all that's to make them motivated. How do we make them driven? Can you make your child or your athlete driven? So think about this for a minute. How many athletes, professional athletes or college athletes, do we hear about who say all the time, I'm driven to do what I do. It's beyond wanting to do this. It is my life and I'm driven. We hear that all the time. But not all of those athletes represent all you all. You all can be incredibly successful at what you do and be motivated or happy or having a good time. And the reason I say that is I'm going to tell you quickly, very quickly, about 3 athletes. Well, it's actually 4 because 2 of them are twins, okay? I'm going to tell you about some athletes, some of whom are incredibly motivated, some who are motivated and not driven. I'm going to tell you about my college volleyball players. These are 2 college beach volleyball players. They are twins, identical twins. And they play for a Division I school that is very successful in college beach volleyball. They're now a part of the U21 USA team. These young women are the most driven people I have ever seen. They live and sleep and breathe volleyball. They take all their classes and all they can think about is volleyball. They are so intense and competitive out on the court that the other team not only can't tell who they are because they look exactly the same and they trade out all the time, but they're scared to death of them because they've got a scowl on their face and they want to win, and that's all they want to do. They're very successful, but part of the reason that I work with them is they're so driven that sometimes when they make a mistake, and athletes will make a mistake, they get on themselves so hard, so bad, that they lose their place in the game. I have watched them blow matches because they're so driven to be successful that they can't be successful. They can't have fun at it. And when working with them over the last year, everything we've done is to focus on why did we do this in the first place? Why do we love beach volleyball? And the less driven they became, the more motivated they became, and the more successful they became. That's one example. Let me give you another example. This is a D1 basketball player, female basketball player. Incredibly motivated. She lives, breathes, sleeps basketball. She wants to play in the WNBA. But a lot of her coaches think she's not driven. She's quiet. She isn't very intense. She doesn't get very loud. She doesn't get very angry. She loves her sport, but if you talk to her, you wouldn't know if she's intense or not. When I asked her if she was driven, you know what she asked me? What? And this is somebody who could play in the WNBA. She's like, what does that mean? I said, what do you mean, what does that mean? You're driven to do this. She's like, well, I don't understand what that means. Can you tell me, Coach Josh? I said, well, you feel it in here. You want to play your sport in here. And she said, I literally have no idea. And this is somebody who absolutely wants to play at the highest level. She loves basketball. She's not driven. So this is a message that I have for you as parents and coaches. We can help our young athletes be incredibly motivated. We can make it so that they enjoy the sport, so that they push themselves, so that they learn the life lessons. But here's the choice that we have to make as coaches and as parents. The driven part is up to them. You can't make them driven. And one of the things that I tell parents over and over again, and it's almost counterintuitive, it's almost what your gut tells you not to do. The more you push to make them driven, the more you push because you want them to be so passionate about what they're doing, the opposite effect will happen. You will pummel them. You will take the fun out of it. You will take whatever they've got and you will drain it. Because here's the thing, driven isn't here. Driven isn't here. Some might even say driven is genetic. You can't touch driven. You can touch motivated, and motivated can lead to driven. And one other thing I want you to remember as parents and as athletes and as coaches, you can have athletes who are not driven, who are motivated, they love their sport, and still be incredibly successful. Not every athlete has to be driven to be successful. And one other piece to that, every driven athlete who lives, sleeps, and breathes their sport is not always successful. So we have a choice to make as parents, as coaches, and as athletes. What do we want? What do we want to do? So I'm going to go back to the athletes. How many of you want to have fun doing what you do? By a show of hands. How many of you want to hate what you do and this is terrible and you hate being here and you can't stand it? Right? How many of you go home after a practice or a match and when you've had a good time, you have a good feeling about what you've done? How many of you love to come here and get your practice in?
I think you need to ask the question.
How many of you love to come here and get your practice in? How many of you love smoothies?
Got to sleep.
That's right. Parents, take home message. Take home message. And look, I'm a parent of 2 grown children. If you want these kids to be their best, whatever their best is, work to motivate them. Don't work to try to make them driven. I've seen too many collegiate athletes whose parents and coaches push them past the point of motivation. And instead of creating drive, it created frustration, it created disillusionment, and it took away from these athletes the love of their game. Ultimately, at this age, we want them to just love it. And if you can help them love it, then whatever potential they're gonna be, they're gonna be. If you focus on the drive, and you focus on trying to get them to drive, you're gonna suck the motivation out of them. And I know it feels opposite, because we all as adults want our kids to be passionate about what they do. But trust me on this, because I've seen it at the highest level. Make sure they're having fun. If they're having fun, then whatever they're gonna be, they're gonna be. If they're not having fun, they go nowhere. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Klapow. Can everybody give him another round of applause? So really quickly, before we move on to the next thing, I want to do a drawing for Black Watch t-shirts. So everyone should have gotten a ticket on the way in, and I'm going to call out a number, the last 3 numbers of the ticket. If you have it, please step forward and